Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and as always, by my good friend, my business partner, the lovely Mr. Jason Neal Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen in the house.
Hello. It's lovely to be in said house.
Well, really, you're in your office shed, garden, hoosey.
No, we don't use the S word. Thank you. It's offensive.
Cabin? Do we use the C word?
No C words. Just garden office.
Garden office.
That's it. That's all that needs to be said about it.
There's a few things I want to discuss here, but before I do that, I want to say how lovely it was just last week being down in Virginia with you.
It was lovely to have you.
Yeah, we got together. We went to see our friends at Virginia Distillery Company.
We did.
Amanda and Brian and Beck.
Mm-hmm. Beck did a tremendous job. We had the great honor of having our photograph taken. Just the one, singular.
Just the one, yeah, single picture.
What a picture it is.
Click and done. Thank you for taking the time to purchase tickets, rent a car. Well, we didn't rent a car, but yeah. It's been 12 years since we've had a proper photo shoot of the two of us. Now, granted, there is three of us in the group, but Jess is stuck in Glasgow while we're here on the East Coast.
She's even farther from Virginia than you are.
Right? Yeah, so... But it was nice. I don't think we've changed much.
No.
In those 12 years.
I think the photos will demonstrate that. I will say this, my hair is officially the same color.
Yeah. I tell you, though, when you and I first met, I mean, your hair was white. I think there may have been like one little grain of cracked black pepper in your hair, but your goatee was it was about 60-40, I would say.
Yeah. And now?
It's like 99-1.
Yeah, that part is true. Yeah. What are you going to do?
Make fun of you?
At least it continues to grow.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. After I visited with you, I went off to Minnesota and did an event with a group called Whiskey Galore up in Duluth, way up in Duluth, up by Lake Superior, which is just a stunning part of the world. Have you ever been up there? Have you been that way?
Duluth. Lovely people in Duluth.
So my first time in Duluth, then I had a little time in Minneapolis, and then my final day was in Rochester, Minnesota. I did an event with a shop called Jack's Bottle Shop, and I led a masterclass there highlighting 4 of our whiskeys. And I see everybody sit down, and I'm looking at all these faces. I think there was maybe 25 sat down, and then they had to bring in some extra chairs to sit in the back because more people wanted to join. And as I'm talking, I'm looking around. You know, you always look for those familiar faces. Have I seen anybody in a previous tasting or at a Jubilee or
on a Zoom?
Or on a Zoom, right? Yeah. And I keep on looking at this guy. It's like, handsome, middle-aged white guy. And then I moved the mirror and...
Yeah, you could tell just by looking at him that he believed you have perfect pitch.
And I sort of stopped my tasting and I said, "Are you Tim Gullicksrud?" I don't think I gave him a full name check. I think I just said, "Are you Tim?" And he said, "I am." And he's like, "There's so many Nation members. How did you recognize me?" Like, this is the one man who told me I had perfect pitch or near perfect pitch. I'm not going to forget you, sir.
Man, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Yours is just through compliments.
Through compliments, yep. So, we did the tasting, the master class.
You and Tim.
Just me and Tim. Everybody else. I ignored everybody else. So we had that, and then we went to the secondary room where they had just like a small little, walk around event. Maybe 6-7 tables, something like that, where everybody's pouring their wares. And Tim comes up, and this was towards the end of the tasting, and I forget what I poured him, but he said, I've got a question.
He clearly didn't compliment it, or you would have remembered. I think this whiskey has perfect pitch. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed. Example X.
He was talking to me about how he approaches every single new bottle of whiskey. And, and it's not necessarily like his regimen, it's just how he connects with that bottle. And quite often what happens is he'll open the bottle, he'll give it a pour, he'll give it a nose, he'll give it a taste. He doesn't love it. It's okay, but he doesn't love it. And that can go on for maybe, I forget the number. Again, it wasn't a compliment, so I forget the exact number. But, somewhere into the depths of that bottle, let's assume he said a third or 40% into the bottle. It wasn't just like the first couple drams. And he said, once I hit that point, then I finally understand the whiskey. Then I know what's going on, and I appreciate what's going on. And for him, it was that evolution, right, where we talk about how oxidation can affect a spirit, and as you're going through that bottle, the liquid does change slightly, and sometimes oxygen benefits, and and anyway, for him, it finally comes around after he's dug into the bottle for a while. He did say, I do remember this. He did say the one bottle he opened, and it was the best thing he had tasted from the get-go.
Here comes a compliment.
It was our Port Charlotte 14-year-old, and he brought a dram, and he shared that with me because he's a lovely gentleman. And he says nice things about it.
Which is a funny one for that to happen on, because it was Big Pete and Big Sherry at natural cask strength. You'd almost expect that one to have a journey, right? Going through the neck and through the shoulders and saying, okay, I see how it's coming together now. But for that to come straight out, first pop cork, and be immediately there for him, I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah. I'm a little surprised.
So my question for you, based off of the conversation that I had with him, he asked me, he said, how does it work for you guys? Like, it's clear what you're bottling is excellent whiskey, but I don't get it off the bat. It's clear that you guys are getting it off the bat because you're saying yes to the whiskey. So he wants to know if we make any potential considerations to how that whiskey may evolve over X number of months. And so...
Yes. Terrific question. Absolutely terrific. And I think it potentially speaks to the inexact science of cask selection. And it's interesting. So I spoke to a very dear friend just the other day, Roberto, who many people know in connection with Jack Rose through in DC. I was talking to Roberto the other day, and he was, as always, saying, what do you have coming? What's coming down the pipe? And I'm telling him how many casks we've been sampling and how many whiskies we've got scheduled, and e-commerce and retail US and retail across the globe, and then 2025 plans. It's just massive, massive, massive. And I found myself in thinking about, what's really head turning? What, to Tim's point, is an immediate success?
Yeah. Yep.
And obviously, you and I are really proud of every cask we have selected for future release. Yeah. There's none where we're coming out of it going, oh, I hope that turns a corner, or, oh, I hope that shows well by the time we bottle it, right?
Can you imagine?
Those do not exist. Those do not exist.
Crossing our fingers every time.
Right? Right? Those don't exist. But then I'm also thinking, there are some casks that coming out of our, selection process, I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, when this lands, I think people are going to be blown away.
Yeah.
And so the Aberfeldy is one that I've been talking about. It's coming after the summer. It's coming to e-commerce. And I think the truncated label note says something along the lines of purchase in August and squirrel it away for your festive celebrations, right?
Yeah.
And when I was talking to Roberto, it's big sherry, but the spirit is there. The Aberfeldy spirit is there.
Yep.
And so being super excited about that Aberfeldy doesn't make the rest of the offerings any less. It's just, I think that one is going to be a home run at first opening.
Yeah.
And I think people will talk about that in very special ways, along the lines of the Happy Accident Dalyuen that accidentally got moved from first fill bourbon to first fill sherry. Yeah. Right? When I'm out doing tastings, people are asking me, is there any of that Dalyuen left? That was unbelievable. It's like, well, sometimes you get a happy accident. So, do we factor in the evolution of a cask from the point of selection to the point of bottling to the point of release? No. Are there some things that even in cask sample form seem exceptional? Yes. Does that lessen the impact of any of the other selections? No.
Yeah. I haven't not thought about it, but I don't put too much weight on this idea of in-bottle evolution as the bottle drains. But the way that I've thought about it was, right, good spirit, good wood is going to equal good evolution. How that will go, we don't know, right? But I don't think at any point in time that that liquid's going to take a turn and then just say, it was amazing when you selected it, and boop, a touch of oxygen hits it and it turns to shit. I don't think that's the case, and so you kind of just sort of trust in the process and go with it
And that's what I mean by the inexact science of cask selection.
Yeah.
There's trust coming in. There's a process still to happen. There's movement across oceans. There's delivery across continents.
Yeah, bottle shock, all of it.
Right? Yeah, you cannot plan or account for all of that. It's just not possible. And I think we potentially rely on the history that we've had. 12, 13 years of single cask nation, and we haven't been let down yet by a cask selection and then the process of bottling and then the process of transportation. I will say, though, and I think this is true, and I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before, there are definitely moments when a whiskey, to our minds, to our memories, will change from selection to launch or delivery into the United States. And I always talk about the Craigellachie that came in, and when you'd first opened that, you'd say, I don't think this is the Craigellachie we selected. This has none of the attributes that we selected here.
Yep.
And I had a little bit of the original sample left. And in pouring them side by side, they did have more in common than memory allowed for. And so I think it's sometimes vital to have that little bit left. I have heard of others and other independent bottlers who have gone the mass spectrometer path.
All right.
And they've actually done chemical analysis of a bottle received compared to an original sample that they had. And differences have been found. And that becomes a very different conversation. We've never had that in 13 years.
No, we're lucky. We're definitely lucky there. Not that it's a rampant kind of thing. I shouldn't say it that way, but
Well, and mistakes happen, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you do hear of the wrong cask being bottled, and hopefully you try to catch it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. My final thought on it is just to echo what you said before, is this 13 years of bottling casks, and you get into this rhythm where you understand what those are going to do. And again, the history, the experience, plus the fact that good spirit and good wood equals great whiskey. It's likely not going to move in any, wrong directions during the process of slowly draining that bottle. So, yeah, like you had said, it's inexact, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the value of experience.
Yeah.
And I think that is the value of trusting established IBs. We always talk about having favorite IBs and IBs with whom your palate works. You also know their treatment of casks and their bottlings, and so it's familiarity with an IB. And so, gosh, just like you represented us very well by recognizing Tim from the Nation. That's why the Nation is so important to us, and why we take the Nation so seriously. It's people who trust in the process and who have had plenty of ongoing success with our selections. It's very cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Anytime I think of the Nation, I get a little verklempt. It's very awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah, and not taken for granted.
Not in the
all.
slightest.
Not one bit.
Not in the slightest. And if you joined the Nation yesterday and you bought a bottle and you enjoyed it, you're as dear to us as someone who's been with us for 13 years. So thank you for joining the Nation.
So, Jason, the past few weeks, we've been highlighting interviews that you conducted during your time in Austin, Texas, where I couldn't travel with you. For personal reasons, and then after that Austin trip, maybe before that trip, I forget how time works, you went off to LA to meet with the two founders of Lodestar Whiskey. I wonder if you could just give people a little taste of who these people are that you're talking to and their brand.
Yeah, we actually had Shay DeWall reach out. Shay DeWall, PR person running her own PR agency in LA. Had the chance to talk with her over email, talk with her on the phone, meet her in person. She's lovely, absolutely lovely. And meeting and chatting with her was very cool, and talking a little bit about our own histories that brought us to where we are in whiskey. Was very, very nice. And so Shay introduced us to Anna and Wendelin of Lodestar. They've put together an interesting proposition where currently they've got a single release that is distributed in the LA area, maybe a few points outside of LA, but not currently outside of California. And what they set out to do was bring together a high rye bourbon with an American single malt and explore flavor and explore a word that Jess and I sometimes talk about, accessibility. Right?
Yeah.
And Jess doesn't tend to like whiskey being described as accessible, or at least sometimes whiskey pricing being described as accessible. She thinks it cheapens the enterprise.
I get it.
And so for Anna and Wendelin, as you'll hear in the interview here, as two women who came from the entertainment industry but had been drinking, imbibing, enjoying whiskey in said entertainment industry, they were looking at the whiskey industry and saying, how do we put something out here that is inclusive and accessible and pleasant and wonderful and delicious? And we started to get into that in the conversation. We tried to tease that out a little bit. It was interesting talking to them. I know they've been well interviewed in the LA area. I'm not sure how far outside of, again, the LA area the interviews have gone, but when I pitched up, and this was in June, gosh, and we're releasing it in August here.
Wow. Okay.
When I pitched up and we were going to have this full form interview, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 55, maybe topping out at an hour. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to begin with. I could tell there was how's this gonna go? What's this? Don't we just get to talk for 6 or 7 minutes and then get out of here? And so I know there were a few moments when the answer was a soundbite, right? We all get into the elevator pitch of our own brands.
Yep.
And I was able to keep saying, like, could you tell me more? Like, could you add on to that? Yeah. And so we did. We had our usual far-reaching conversation. Their lives are very interesting. Their past history is interesting, and what they're trying to achieve with Lodestar is interesting. And of course, as we tend to do, we also talk about what may exist in the future for Lodestar, even just the beginnings of some suggestions of where they might go. So I hope you're ready for this. This was a few months in the planning. Mm-hmm. It needed me to be in LA because I wanted to have this sit-down interview with them. And so that was me there middle of June. And today we present the full interview with Anna and Wendelin of Lodestar. Sitting here in LA with Anna and Wendelin, the creators, the founders of Lodestar Whiskey. Thanks very much for making time for me today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you to Shay for booking the room in which we are all meeting. Much appreciated. She's giving us a thumbs up. So to get started in, I think, a pretty easy spot, a pretty relaxed spot is... can you tell us a bit about your spark? What, just as private individuals, as people living your lives, how did whiskey enter in? And what was your experience like as you went along?
Well, Anna and I spent 10 plus years working together in the music and entertainment space. And we had the opportunity to travel a lot for work all over the country, around the world. And we often enjoyed whiskey in that space. And we both had the opportunity to try a lot of different whiskeys and really developed an enjoyment and a passion for the product. And we really developed our palates and figured out what we liked and what we didn't like, and also realized that as two millennial women, we didn't feel very or super represented in that industry. And we thought that might be something that we could change at some point. And then, work and life went on, and it was kind of something that was always in the back of our minds. And then the pandemic hit, and everything in our entertainment space came to a halt. And we kind of looked at each other and we were like, maybe this is the time to do something about that little idea we had way back when. And then we kind of jumped in. And
so this is perfect. You have delivered the entrepreneur's dream, where you have I can tell that you have perfected your 30-second, 60-second elevator pitch, because you have given me 4 distinct areas to slow down, back up, and return to. So, as whiskey geeks, whiskey nerds, you glossed very quickly over. We tasted some stuff. We knew what we liked. We knew what we didn't. I want to know more about your palate. What did you like? And if you don't feel comfortable naming brands, that's totally cool. If you want to name brands, that's totally cool too. What type of flavors did you find resonating with your palate? And when you started, were there immediate loves? Were there flavors that grew on you, or brands? And I know I said you don't have to name brands, but was there anything that you started out with thinking, oh, that's not quite for me, and then it grew on you? So there's a couple of aspects to that question, but talk to me about your palate. What did you like? What did you not like?
Well, I will name a brand. I started drinking Jameson. That was the first whiskey that
This is Wendelin here, just since we're on audio. Wendelin is committing to Jameson here.
And what I really liked about that whiskey was that it was a lighter whiskey. It was very approachable, both from like a viscosity side, but also a flavor side. And it had a lot of citrus notes, which was something that I really enjoyed.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
And then I don't know if you want to jump in, if there was anything that you...
I think my starter whiskey, so to say, was also Jameson.
Okay.
Yeah, it took a minute. I mean, we're talking decades, kind of, to go from there and develop kind of a love for whiskey in the way that it was fun to taste different things.
Yeah.
And then we just, I don't know, at some point we just kind of made it a thing where we tasted whatever we could. And I remember one thing that is very clear in my mind is when we traveled to Chicago for work and we tasted Koval for the first time.
Yes.
And that was like a moment for me where I was like, wow, this, like, it kind of blew me away. And that was one of many, but that was one that stands out in my memory for sure.
In terms of flavor, in terms of process?
In terms of flavor, yeah. And then, as Wendelin touched on earlier, it was a long time where we just were pretty casual whiskey consumers. We didn't have really any thoughts or aspirations in the beginning of entering that space at all. Yeah, I guess over time we just developed our palates and we understood a little bit more what we were drinking and the sensations we were having as we were consuming whiskey. And then when we jumped in and decided to follow this passion, we also came at it very much from a consumer standpoint. Like, what do we enjoy? What do we like? What do we not like? How do we consume whiskey? What serves are the ways that we like to consume it, or people that we know in our community consume it. And that very much informed kind of what we created. But also it was, I mean, that's just who we were. We didn't have a distilling background or anything like that.
Sure.
And at the same time, it was also intentional. And we wanted to create something for people that kind of came to whiskey in the same way that we did.
So I've been really taken by reading your story, and you talk about community a lot. And for us with Single Cask Nation, the nation is important to us, and we talk about community a lot as well. I'm curious, Wendelin was sharing before we hit record here that you've both got German parents, and that makes me feel very comfortable. And so we're sitting here talking about European parentage, and I know what that means, and so that's good. When you talk about community that you've kind of found, that you've moved into in America, for a family, what did whiskey look like in the family, or what did alcohol look like in the family? Because obviously when you talk German, I start thinking beer, I start thinking, maybe schnapps, I'm thinking of a comfort with booze within your family. And is that fair to say? Am I reading that right with the cultural lineage that you share?
Yes, you are. Yes, we're cousins, and we grew up in a really big family with a lot of Europeans in it, and so there was lots of our family community was coming together around big dinner tables with lots of food and good drinks and cocktails. And as far as whiskey goes, we both have. My dad passed away a while ago, but we both had whiskey drinking fathers. And so it was just something that was around, and it was something that we grew up with, that we still enjoy very much, kind of creating that, that coming together over food and drinks. And that's what we do in our personal lives with friends and family that we bring together. But also that's kind of where our sense of community and our striving for building community around this product came from.
Wendelin, any connections there? Any wider circle to be cast? Any wider net?
We had a lot of opportunities to come together around shared experiences, and alcohol wasn't the center point of that, but it was always like something that was along for the ride, and that made those experiences extra special, I guess. Yeah.
So again, I'm leading the witness here before we hit record. You were telling me a rather fascinating Isla story. Do you feel comfortable sharing that?
Oh yeah,
on
sure.
Wax?
I just part of my dad's family lives in the UK, and he has a great uncle who. He has passed away since, but he spent a lot of time on Isla, and
wonderful.
There was barley grown on his property that was sold to
So
Brooke Lodde.
Cool. So cool.
And so I have yet to find a bottle because I would love to buy it for my dad because it was his godfather, and I think it would be meaningful to him. But there is a bottling of Brooke Lodde with exclusively the barley from this great uncle's property, and
That's
would be great.
awesome. That is really awesome. Do you find yourself drawn to the flavors of Isla? Is that a flavor profile that you were enjoying as you were going through some of your whiskey exploration, or were your flavors more of an American whiskey? I know we said Jameson earlier with the Irish whiskey. Did Isla ever fit in there for you?
I mean, I'm not for me, the heavily peated whiskeys is not where I gravitate towards,
That's
but
cool.
I find Brooke Lodde to be a very approachable Isla whiskey.
Very
and
much so.
It's super fun to drink and smooth, and it's got more of those fruity flavors that I look for in a whiskey. And so, yeah, I would say that Brooke Lodde was definitely something that was kind of in the back of my mind, at least.
I love that so much. As you were going through this journey, as you were tasting along the way, both of you now alluded to, we learned what we liked, we learned what we didn't. Can you put a few leaves on those branches for us? Can you talk a little bit about those flavors that really captivated you? I know we described what was in Jameson that you really liked. Did you start collecting flavors as you went along and started storing away? Keep those in mind for the future?
Sure. I mean, we talked earlier before we hit record about cocktails, and I very much enjoy a whiskey cocktail. And so when we were thinking about the different ways that people would consume our whiskey, cocktails were definitely part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And I really love a rye in a cocktail because it's spicy and it has that backbone that you kind of need in a cocktail to stand up against other flavors in the cocktail. And so we talked about that. We talked about how we wanted a product that had a backbone that brought in those like warm baking spices, or holiday spices. And so that was definitely part of the recipe, so to speak, in our head. And then we talked about wanting a product that when you drink it neat, you want it to be smooth and approachable, and something that even a newer whiskey drinker could enjoy. So if you're not used to drinking whiskey, that you want something that doesn't just like smack you in the face, essentially. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
agreed.
And so we talked a lot about kind of what is it like when you first try the whiskey, like how long is the kind of the flavor notes, and we wanted something with a longer, rounder finish. I bring up the word smooth again, something because that's approachable. And so that's where the single malt came in then eventually, is that we wanted something that had a long finish, something that felt approachable but that wasn't too sweet. And so we felt like the cereal notes and the toastiness that you get from an American single malt would work really well there. And yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Not really. Citrus notes was something that was important to us just because we both really enjoy citrus notes.
So a brightness to the experience.
Correct. And we thought about viscosity. We wanted it to be we consume whiskey in many different ways. And so we wanted it to be high quality to where you can sip it. But we also, if somebody takes a shot, you don't do that with a sipper that's just kind of more syrupy and has a different kind of consistency, I guess. So
Sure.
yeah, we were thinking serve strategies at the same time as we were thinking flavors, basically.
That's really interesting. I love that conversation that you were having internally, and I'm really curious, as you made that transition from being in music and film management into, we're going to put out a whiskey, what were your internal conversations like? Was one of you gung-ho, like, we can do this, and the other one was like, well, let's let's check some boxes here? Like, I'm very curious, because of being in the industry and for co-creating a brand with Joshua, I know what those kind of conversations can look like. How did your conversations go, and did one of you take the lead and one was stronger than the other? Which one of you is the sensible one and which one of you is the risk taker?
I think it was fairly easy and the conversations were not long because we had such a history of working together.
Okay.
So we had a shorthand in communicating
Nice.
over work things, and we had worked together for over a decade. So we really were kind of a well-oiled machine. I don't know if
Finishing one another's sandwiches.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I am probably a little bit more of the risk taker in the equation, but it didn't take much convincing, I have to say. Yeah, we just kind of looked at each other. We were like, things had changed. Pandemic had stopped everything in our world.
Talk more about that as well.
And we were, we didn't really know how things were going to play out, obviously, as nobody knew at that time. And then when things kind of started a little bit opening up again, we had already kind of, gone down this road of trying to figure out flavor profile and creating something. But we hadn't really fully made the switch over yet. And
Sure.
I remember this moment where I was talking with some people about potentially joining their management group for artist management. And I remember after this meeting, stepping out of there and being like, just having this feeling of like, no, I don't want to do this.
That's wonderful.
And I want to build this thing. And building something that was just so authentic to us. Mm-hmm. And authenticity is a thing that comes back for us a lot as well. And when you work in artist management or even record label work and all of that, you're obviously working with talent, you're working with, so, and it was wonderful. It was a great time, but it was something to where I at least felt like it would be really exciting to build something that is just really authentic to the two of us.
Interesting. Really interesting. Maybe you can answer this, maybe you can't. If there hadn't been a pandemic, do you think you would have got to the same moment?
Wow, that's like the $1 million question.
I told you I'd be asking the hard questions today.
Honestly, I don't know for sure. I think potentially it would have happened much later. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I don't know if the timing and everything would have been right for us to do it. Yeah. It wouldn't have happened at that point. It would have happened if it would have happened, it would have happened later. Well, yeah.
I have something to add to that.
Please.
Because I think I also know that feeling in that moment when you're like, yes, and I want to do it, and I want to do it in this way, and feeling like, you know what, if we do it in this way, it's gonna work. Mm-hmm. Because it, we'll have all of the tenacity and the strength and the inspiration to kind of push us through those hurdles. And I think that the pandemic created a very unique time where it clarified a lot of things. And it definitely clarified things for me, and I think it clarified things for Anna as well. And that was like that push that I at least needed to really dive in.
Well, and you hear it from people, right? Everyone's got a moment. And I love what you just said, Anna, about, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this thing over there. And it's interesting when people keep their jobs, their day jobs, on the back burner while they explore this new opportunity. And invariably, there's a job loss, a redundancy, a change in circumstances. Kids have graduated college and you don't need that. Like, everybody's got a part where they go, now we can throw ourselves into this, come what may. And so I know my question is unfair, saying without a pandemic, would you have reached that moment? But when you say, no, I don't want to do that job anymore, you know that was percolating away inside of you, right? You know that moment was going to come at some point. I love hearing that from your story.
Yeah, again, the pandemic, like Wendelin just said, probably sped it up. You know?
So with us sitting here talking about flavors, talking about a moment of impetus, we've got Lodestar in our glasses here, and I've been sipping away. And as you've been talking about spices and holiday spices and baking spices and rye spices, those are clearly prominent as we sit here sipping this straight au natural. And that longer finish from the American single malt there. Our very dear friend, Dave Schmier, the last time we saw him was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Sourcing is not a crime." And so I'm curious for the two of you, as you endeavored upon this and you thought about flavors and you looked around for where you could find those flavors, was there a process of... rejection is such a strong word, but were there moments when you thought to yourselves, okay, this sample that we've got in front of us, that's not going to get the job done? And then there was a sample that would get the job done. What did your journey look like as you were sourcing for your Lodestar, your brand?
Yeah, we knew that we had to learn a lot, and we knew that we wanted to take time. We didn't want to rush it. So we traveled to many different distilleries just to learn about whiskey making, just to kind of understand it a little bit more, and to start tasting and kind of thinking, we had a really clear idea of what we wanted in the bottle, but we didn't know how to get it in the bottle.
Oh, pause for 1 second. Say that again, please.
So Anna. We had a clear idea of what flavors we were going for and what we wanted in a bottle, but we didn't know yet how to get it in the bottle.
I love that. Okay. Please continue.
Yeah. And so then it was just a lot of learning and, meeting people and trying different things and visiting distilleries. And then fairly quickly we realized in order to get to the flavor profile that we had in mind, we had it written out on like a big piece of paper. We would have to blend.
Mm-hmm.
And at first that seemed like, oh God, like how do we even approach it? How do you do that? And then, but as with everything, the more you kind of learn about it, the more confidence you get. And then we ended up connecting with a master blender who suggested American single malt as one of the components. And then it was just kind of from there, it just took off. We tried a couple of different things. He clearly understood what we were going for, and I think he was excited by what we were going for because it wasn't the most conventional blending approach.
Sure.
And then we just tried and got close-ish and fine-tuned and finally really got what we wanted in a bottle. And then the next challenge, I guess, was recreating that once we were kind of ready to bottle for an actual production run. Mm-hmm. And that was a really interesting time as well because we couldn't get there. Like all of a sudden it was like, how did we do this the first time? And now it's not possible anymore. And understanding obviously that whiskey is a living product and which is exciting and wonderful. But we were like, we should be closer. And so we didn't really understand. And finally we just asked for the individual components of, like many different kind of versions And Wendelin took it upon herself to just at our kitchen table to start blending herself and got there. And so that was also, first of all, really fun, but it also was good to understand that we had gotten to a point where we could pick things and really understand what needed to go in. And we caught a little bit the blending bug, because I can't wait until we have another expression and can do it all over again.
So we recently had James Saxon of Compass Box on the podcast, and we were talking to him about, Joshua and I have limited experience with blending, but in that limited experience, we brought different flavors together, and we thought we were moving towards a final product. And then we thought, just a little bit more of that. Boop. And it was a different blend on our hands. For us, that was a little bit frustrating. And we maybe didn't embrace this is a wonderful challenge, right? I maybe got a little more Scottish pessimistic about it. And I just threw my toys out the pram. So I'm curious, as Anna's starting to allude to here with the blending process, did you find it to be non-linear? How did you cope with if you add a little bit more of that, it may take you in a different direction and not finally seal the deal the way you maybe hoped it would? What was that experience like for you?
We definitely also had a moment of frustration. I remember that when we couldn't get to what we had originally put in a bottle. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know, something in me just was like, nope, we just got to keep going. Like, maybe there's something else. Maybe we have to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, or maybe there's a missing component that we're not thinking about, because again, it's like we're newer to this, right?
Sure.
And I was like, I if there's something else that we're missing, then let's learn about that, and then we can really own this, and that was important to both of us. So, yeah, we ended up thinking a lot more about also where our barrels were being stored in the rickhouse. Mm-hmm. And we were like, that was something that was being not glossed over, but it was like not an important enough component of the conversation. And once we went back to like our original idea and our original brand brief, essentially, which is like, we want to be approachable not only to people who are seasoned whiskey drinkers, but we also want to be approachable to people who have never tried whiskey. Mm-hmm. And what is the number one thing that everybody keeps telling us and everybody keeps saying? It's so smooth. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to drink. And so we thought about that, and that's how we ended up, we need to revisit this. We need to revisit, where is it being stored in the rickhouse? When we're dumping the barrels, like what proof are we dumping at? Mm-hmm. And so we re-looked at all of that, and that kind of in the end was the key, where we're like, okay, we know that these flavors is like, we have like our flavors that we're trying to hit, but we're also trying to hit the viscosity. We're also trying to hit the color. We're also trying to hit like the smoothness, and that ended up getting us there.
I just want to add that to in that equation of like, it needs to be smooth, and that was the thing, and we also want color and viscosity. We could get smooth all day long, but boring.
Oh yeah.
And so that was a thing of like a realization too. It's like it's just too boring if we don't, So then that played a part in the blending process, obviously, as well.
And so, are you getting to do this in California? Are you traveling out to another state to get to do this? Is there back and forth there for you? The reason I asked the question is for Joshua and I, and with Jess, our global sales manager in Glasgow, we always have this, as independent bottlers, we're joining the dots. And so we don't have a warehouse. We don't have a bottling line. Since we were acquired, that has changed since January. But traditionally, we were heading out to Kentucky and being there for the disgorging of the casks, or working out proof and what was it coming out at, and all that malarkey. How much of this are you getting to control, be a part of, get your thumbprint on day in and day out, and how much of that are you still kind of I don't want to put words in your mouth at being frustrated by, but there's inherent difficulties in sourcing and relying on other people's contract services. How's that looking for you?
I mean, we traveled to go to taste, to really get to the bottom of what we needed. Mm-hmm. We also then request samples that we get shipped, and then we have a gazillion bottles at home and try to go through those. And then we ended up right from the beginning working with a small, kind of like a small mom and pop distillery in Indiana, actually, who dump the barrels and blend and bottle for us, and we also traveled there to get to meet them and see kind of how that works. And it's still like, hand labeling and everything. So it's a small operation, but they've been great partners. So we're hoping to stick with them. And that's kind of the extent to how I don't know. It's some travel to the distilleries, like I said, to the co-packer. But it's also just getting lots of shipments of samples and trying different things.
I do want to add, because we talked about community, and I very much feel like the spirits industry is a people industry. Mm-hmm. And so I do think it was important for us to travel, to meet these people, to really get them on the same page as us, and to build those connections. Mm-hmm. And that way we have also built up trust in their process and how they end up putting our product in a bottle and then getting it to where we want it to be.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. In an area that I'm not used to working in at all, I don't have an eye for it at all, but in sitting here looking at your bottle and your cork and your labeling, we've talked obviously about flavors and whiskey, and those are things near and dear to my heart and things that I understand. Packaging, labeling, design. We've got Steve Hawley on board for that now, and he's doing a lovely bang-up job with us. Well, what was your experience like in putting together the package and knowing what you wanted to show, that you wanted to represent?
So for us, that was something that we felt very comfortable with just because of our previous work lives. And also Anna and I both have a creative background. And again, we'll go back to the authenticity part of it, where we really were like, whatever we put on a bottle is going to feel really authentic to us. And again, we thought about our end consumer. We thought about our own experience and the experience of our community. We wanted to build a product or build the packaging that felt high end but approachable, and that was we wanted something that was appealing to women, but that wasn't. We weren't going to pink wash something, right? Yeah. So
you weren't going to pander.
Yeah.
Yes. We thought a lot about color, both of the actual liquid, but also of our label. Yeah. We chose 2 different colors for the front and the back label. That was a choice to just bring a little bit of a modern feel to it. And so I think the line we were walking was creating something that was, to us, timeless, had a modern feel, but also still was going back to some recognizable things that you would find in whiskey.
Sure.
Honoring the tradition of that. Yeah.
That makes great sense. I'm really curious. In listening to you, you've talked about being 2 people who had palates and developed flavors and came to this and knew that you hadn't done this before, right? None of us had done it before until we did it for the first time. I'm really curious, as you describe that, to go with the name Lodestar, which seems to be this kind of leading star, this kind of part of the sky that you maybe aim for. How did you come around to Lodestar in this context?
We thought about the things that were important to us, which community is one of them. Mm-hmm. Joy and celebration is one of them. Mm-hmm. Inclusivity. and authenticity, like we mentioned earlier. And so when we were thinking about how are we going to do this, how are we going to approach this, I think community, first of all, that's, as we touched on earlier, partly of how we grew up in a big family with lots of people around. But also the pandemic had an influence there because the whole world lost their connection, basically. And it just became so clear how much we were missing that, us personally, but how much everybody was missing that. And so in building a brand kind of coming out of the pandemic, that was just such an important part for us, that it had to, we wanted to do something that we could build community around, basically. And so having those things in mind, we were like, when we thought about a name, we basically thought those are our North Stars, those things are our North Stars. And that's what this whole thing is about for us. So that's how Lodestar, which is the North Star, is a lodestar, a navigational star. That's how that came about.
I like the way that it naturally fits you and naturally fits the way you've thought about your brand and launching this. I really like that. You haven't crammed anything in sideways, and I really like that about your project and about the work that you've done. You talked a second ago, Wendelin, about not pandering. And obviously, listen, for the listeners, I'm obviously a middle-aged white guy. I can't get away from that. And when it comes to talking about women in whiskey, it's very important to us, and it's very important to Joshua. But we don't really know how to talk about it, right? I don't want to sit and mansplain women in whiskey to women in whiskey. And so I also know there are certain women in whiskey who don't want to see a differentiation, right? We're all people in whiskey and we all have common goals. And so I'm really curious to hear from you. How do you navigate that, coming on the back of Lodestar, right? How do you navigate that line? And is it as simple as being women in whiskey and you wake up every day as women in whiskey and you go to work as women in whiskey? Or are you still thinking about it and carefully navigating it?
I think you really hit on something really important, which was that nobody wants to be treated differently or like we have to explain things to you differently. I also feel like representation is important. So obviously, yes, us being women in whiskey is part of it, but also, just speaking to women about whiskey in a way that you would speak to anybody, just addressing them, being like, hey, I see you there. Yeah. You maybe haven't tried whiskey because maybe you've never thought that this was a product for you. Maybe it hasn't been marketed to you, or it's just not in your ethos because you don't feel like spoken to. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to talk to you about it.
You make it sound so simple.
Yeah, it's exactly, and it's something we definitely lead with. Like, we are very clear in saying we are women in whiskey, and we are women founders, and it's women owned and operated, this whole situation. But like Wendelin said earlier, it was very intentional not to create a product that would alienate men. Mm-hmm. And we also believe that a younger consumer is not necessarily interested as much in finding brands that are overly gendered in either direction. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we also kept in mind. And yeah, we want to be here for people who already enjoy whiskey, but it's definitely a goal to bring more people into the category, and that for sure includes women.
When you're out there and you're pouring and you're representing your brand, we've had encounters with other brands before, women-led, women-driven, women-represented, and invariably there's still a component of the whiskey lover scene where a young female at a table representing her brand often gets passed over, missed. You talked about seeing the consumer. And we've had it where consumers have asked, well, can I speak to your boss? Can I ask your boss questions? Horrific statements like that. I'm curious from your experience, I wonder if that space is changing. I wonder if female-led brands are becoming more familiar in the whiskey space. Can you speak to that poorly worded, ill-conceived question of mine that didn't really result in a question mark?
I mean, we have limited experience because we're so new. But in the experience we have of being out there and representing our brand to consumers, yes, we have heard this so often. We have this in our own experience that when you as a woman walk up to a bar and order a whiskey, it inevitably elicits a response, a reaction. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive. But it's not like when you order a tequila drink. It's definitely different. And so that's something where we feel there's a lot of room for change still. But at the same time, I have to say, like, we've done we've done a few podcasts in the whiskey space. We've done other press in that space. We've done some whiskey festivals, stuff like that. And the response was really positive, and I did not feel like people were, in those spaces at least, I don't know.
Patronizing.
Looking us over or patronizing. There's been a couple of moments for sure. We're not going to call them out, but...
Have you had the "do you like whiskey" question? Oh, Wendelin, immediately. Okay.
Yeah, like, do you really is this for you? Or do you really like this?
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you punched anybody on the back of that question, or have you simply wanted to? I feel like my knee-jerk response to that would be like, clenched fist.
I have not, but I think to add to what Anna was saying earlier, again, I think we're showing up and saying, like, we're here, we're two women, and this brand is authentically founded by two women. And we're also really, can I swear on this?
Please.
We're also really fucking proud of the product we put in a bottle. Like, our whiskey is really good, and we stand behind it. And I think our branding does stand out. We get that a lot too, where people are like, wow, that bottle looks so cool. Yeah, so I think we're just showing up that way, and I think it's harder to pass over people who do that.
Have you grappled with the sourcing question? I purposely led with, the sourcing is not a crime. Have you had to respond to that in person? Is that an aspect for people?
Not as much. It was something we were actually expecting a little bit when we first started out, but it hasn't happened as much. I feel like blended whiskeys are obviously becoming more of a thing, right. So it's not totally foreign to people anymore. And no, I can't recall that was a thing that came up a bunch. No. And also we, again, just like Wendelin just said, we're very proud of our product. We feel really strongly about it. And we are also proud of the fact that it's a blend, because we created something that you probably can't get to exactly without blending two very different things together.
Well, that's nicely said as well. I like that aspect of it. Yeah, it's that spot of where are you getting to again. Oh, that's very nice. That totally threw me. That was very well said. I was totally leading that in a particular direction. Right now, you've got the one product, the one bottling in the line, and you'd alluded to earlier, Anna, that you'd love the opportunity to go back into this and do this process again. What do you see on the horizon for yourselves? And I know you're in LA area right now. I'm using that as an obvious outsider. You're in the LA area. Plans for expansion of the line and plans for the expansion of the market? Or have you already expanded the market?
No, we're still very much focused on the wider LA area. We want to really build a strong foundation here. And we want to build it organically and build strong relationships with the accounts that we're in and really understand how our consumers responding, how we reach them, how we build this community around it. And so we're taking our time. We're not rushing to run out to a million other markets. The hope is that next year we will be able to expand to other markets in California.
Okay.
And then eventually to another state. But we're going to take it slow. And same with, I mean, the reason why we started with just one expression was just to keep it simple, focus on it, really create something that we are so proud of and that's really, really good. And get out with that and learn how to get it out there and how to reach accounts, but also the end consumer. And then build on that slowly but surely. Yeah.
Just an industry question here. Answer this if you wish, not if you don't. What's it like walking into an account and presenting one SKU? Some people say one mark. We've never been mark people. How is that received? Is there ever I can't bring in one product from you? Like, where would that sit on a shelf? Is there ever any kind of weirdness there?
Not yet.
We're talking to different people.
We get the question, do you have more expressions? We do. And then we say exactly what I just said. We say, no, we don't. And we're keeping it very kind of focused and simple in the beginning. And eventually we will. But yeah.
Okay. So given that you've got your high rye bourbon blended with your American single malt, and it's given you the rye spice that you're looking for, the holiday spices, it's giving you sweetness, it's smooth, and it's got this nice American single malt finish. When you think about other bottles, are you other additions to the line, are you again flavor driven there? Are you now thinking what would be complementary to what you've already got on offer? Well, what's your process looking like for adding to the line?
I mean, it's still pretty wide open, and there's so many ideas that we're discussing and floating around. We don't want to, I mean, we obviously want to make something that we're not out to make the same product again in a slightly different way. Yeah. It has to differentiate itself from it. There's still too many ideas floating to really pinpoint it. And I don't want to say anything, and then we switch direction. And
that checks out as well. No, oh gosh, we've done that a fair few times. I know for myself and Joshua, when we came out with our first 3 casks and those resonated with people, we felt, only speaking personally, a little bit of pressure on the next 3 casks and how would those be received in relation to, and it just felt like we'd gone from being 2 guys trying to put out 3 casks or quality single casks to now being 2 guys continuing a story or adding, or you're both nodding your head looking at me like you know what I'm talking about. And that's what I was kind of alluding to with the next step. Do you feel that a little bit?
I'm going to go with no, because again, we're taking our time. We are building a really strong foundation with the brand, and we're building trust with our customer base. So I think if we get that right, then we will have the trust to be like, hey, we brought this new product into life, try it. And people will be like, yeah. And I also have the trust in us that we will create, whatever we create, it'll be really good.
But I love that you're talking authenticity in our conversation. I love that you're adding trust. For Joshua and myself, with Jess, with the rest of the team, we don't think we've got anything if we're not authentic and if we don't have trust. And the nation has put tremendous trust in us. And we've always got the nation looking over our shoulder when we're on to the next thing. Even in the acquisition, there was the thought of the nation and how would they see that. And it was wonderful when people responded positively to that. I'm going to get out of here on a little bit of a philosophical question that's been percolating in independent bottling and blending conversations, where we're obviously not bricks and mortar people. We're obviously joining dots and working closely with people to bring our vision to life. for independent bottlers, as a group, we've been talking a little bit about how we represent the distilleries we select from. So we're doing the same as you, right? We're bringing out the cask samples and we're saying, oh, that's a good representation, or, oh, that really presents another side of the distillery. And then as independent bottlers, we've got that distillery name on there to say we selected from them, there it goes. On the blending side, and obviously Compass Box is one we talk about, and absolutely the space that you're in, this is our brand. We're bringing in these flavors to represent these flavors as they represent us. And I'm curious, do you see a split sounds negative, a schism sounds negative, but do you see two separate sandboxes there where independent bottlers are playing in one and blenders are playing in another? Or do you see yourself with the blending that you do as an independent bottler?
What really resonated from the question, or from what you just said, is that we see ourselves in putting flavors out that represent us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that very much is how we approach it. Mm-hmm. And I guess because we have kind of I want to call it freedom, to source from different distilleries and pick exactly the barrels that fit our flavor profile, it is different for sure. So I would put us more in the second.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I thought you were going to go into a different direction with
Go
that
on,
question.
tell me more. I'm curious which direction you thought and what your answer is to that.
Also talking about like how do the people that distill your product come into the conversation, and how do you represent them?
Yeah.
And my hope is that as blending and independent bottling becomes more and more of a trend, and people recognize the effort and the artistry that goes into that in and of itself, that people become less cagey about, talking about who the other people they are working with, because those people deserve recognition and they deserve to be honored for their process as well. And that's always been our approach too, is that, we want to be open and we want to invite everyone to the party and be inclusive. And I feel like just opening that all up feels right.
Yeah. And I hope you can tell in our interview today, I haven't asked you who you're sourcing from, right? That's nobody's business unless you're looking to share that. And so again, back to the Compass Box example, it's not on their label. If you go to their website, you find out the proportions, you find out the distilleries, but it's not front and center. It's more of an additional bit of information for whiskey geeks. But I know for us in the single cask nation space, where we've got spirit of collaboration, we're telling the story of Catoctin Creek. On the day we're recording, our Balcones episode dropped, and we've just released a Balcones, and so we want to tell their story, right? And so I don't want to feel like independent bottlers aren't speaking to blenders and blenders aren't speaking to independent bottlers, and we're all off playing in our own spaces. I'm just looking for, because I'm philosophically trained, looking for clear definitions and making sure that people are included when they're looking to be included, and then finding their space when they're not being included. And I think it's just a careful way of walking the industry line, when on the surface, I think for the consumer, neither of us have bricks and mortar, neither of us are distilling, neither of us are warehousing in our dedicated warehouses. So I just want to be careful how we're all speaking about it and making sure that everybody's welcome to speak in a way that they feel comfortable.
I think that's great.
Well, before I put my foot further in my mouth, we'll get out of here. Thank you both so much for your time. It's been an absolute joy talking to you and a joy drinking the product. I can definitely see Lodestar in a cocktail in my house, but also it's there to be enjoyed neat as well. So thank you for sharing your story and your product with me.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. This was a joy.
Cheers.
Jason, huge thanks to you, and of course, again to Anna and Wendelin for that conversation. I love the way you pitched this sort of, and we're going to use this word again, right? We used it with Tim Gullick's Rud. I'm going to use it with this conversation now. The sort of evolution of that conversation, where as I was going through it, I noticed, okay, there's some soundbitey images, and we all do that as brand owners.
Can't help ourselves, yeah.
Where you just you throw out the answers that you know are surefire answers, and then as people dig in a bit more, you say, okay, they're digging in. I've got to open up some more, and it must be a day that ends in Y, because I'm going to give you a compliment. You do a really good job of disarming your interviewees and getting them to relax and answer questions and I love your interview style and how you were able to get them a little bit out of their shell and talk about A, their whiskey, and B, for me, this was an important thing, how they approach the idea of the topic of women in whiskey.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Which is, it's women in whiskey that need to be discussing women in whiskey, because guys shouldn't be doing it, or we should be following their lead, right? And just hearing their perspective, I thought is great, not just for women but for men as well when we talk about this.
Yeah, I think what's interesting when you meet Anna and Wendelin, it's very easy to go down that path of, two women, two people who sat around drinking whiskey, thought they could bring something to the space.
Yeah.
What are their qualifications? Yeah. How did they get to this point, right? And for me, you and I are two dudes who had whiskey blogs and sat around drinking whiskey and thought we could bring something to this whiskey space. And so I tried to be careful in my conversation with them to not give them unnecessary hurdles to overcome. Yeah. Right? Which is, and why do you think you're the right people to do this? Mm-hmm. Well, they're two people who like whiskey. That's what makes them the right people to do this. Yeah. And so as tend to happens for us in our interviews, you walk in the door, in some instances, having never met the person or people before. And you don't know what they're going to be like. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know what their perspective is going to be. And it's wide open. The possibilities are wide open. As you sit in that interview and you get to know them and they get to know you, you know where you can push and tease and eke out details. Yeah. And you get a much better sense of the people sitting across a table from you. And I'll be honest, and it's not the first time I've done this. It will not be the last time I'll do this. I came out of the interview cheering for them, right? Genuinely hoping for the best for them, hoping that this lands, hoping that this is successful, hoping that they get wider distribution for it, being excited to see their next release, to see what evolution can be made for Lodestar and Anna and Wendelin. So, I meet people as people and chat to them as people and see where we can go from there. And so, with this said, I did have Lodestar in my glass the whole time I was interviewing, so did Anna and Wendelin. But we didn't really spend some time unpacking. I didn't really want to unpack it with the founders, right? Yeah. I was enjoying it. I was talking to them. And I knew I wanted to, once this interview went live, I knew I wanted to unpack it with you, since you and I have our palates, our way of doing business, our way of describing. And so I've got my bottle. I will be transparent, a very kind gift from Anna and Wendelin at the conclusion of the interview. I did not know they had a bottle for me.
Wow.
This is not the bottle we opened to taste during the interview.
Okay.
They gifted me a separate bottle at the end of it. So thanks to them for their generosity. I sent you a sample of it, Joshua. Do you have it in your glass?
Yeah, let me go grab that sample bottle. I've got sample bottle in hand. I've poured said sample into, you're going to like this, Jason, my Jess Lomas glass with her little Sven, what do they call those guys? The little Swedish horsey guys? I forget what she calls them.
Sven Goran Eriksson. People in England are loving that joke.
Sven Goran Eriksson? That's an English joke? They're not liking it. Is that what you're saying? Is this a dig on the English? What's happening right now?
He's the former head soccer coach of the England soccer team.
Oh, right. I only know English horses with their teeth. Shakur, whatever his name is. Right.
Shergar.
Sugar, yeah. So Jason, do us a favor. I know. Anna and Wendelin talked about it a bit in the interview, but can you go over what is in this glass again? What this whiskey is?
And I will do my due diligence and use the front label here. And the front label says a blend of high rye bourbon, an American single malt whiskey, 45% alcohol by volume, 90 proof. And then on the back, and it actually defines Lodestar, which was one of the questions we had in the interview. And then there's a couple of notes on the back. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail yet. It does say dynamic and unexpected. Lodestar is best shared with friends.
Yeah. Well, I got just looking at the liquid in the glass, it's a nice sort of amber color to it. I'd argue it's somewhere along the lines of, color-wise, maybe a 20-something first fill bourbon single malt Scotch whiskey, color-wise, or maybe a younger refill sherry, right?
I would maybe go down that path. Yeah, I wouldn't maybe go into the 20s on an ex-bourbon, but we've definitely seen refill sherry butts with this type of color.
Because there's a little bit of a deeper auburn hue to it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the nose are from, those warm baking spices. I know we did talk about some notes in the interview, but I'm going to leave you to share, since I know I've maybe registered some notes, or at least the conversation along the way.
Well, the nose, on the nose, it seems like it's that high rye bourbon forwardness on the nose, but there's something just like a little elbow to it, right? A little something saying, well, it's not just that, there's something else. But I'm not.
Elbow's an interesting way of saying it.
I think of who do I think of? I think of Holly Sidewand when we were talking with her back when she was with Bacardi, and she was discussing Krugelliki and how young Krugelliki Spirit has that sulfuriness to it, to just give you a little elbow, a little nudge to let you know something's different here. And so I use that every now and again. Subsequent sniffs on this, and some of that American single malt is coming out. I wasn't getting a maltiness from the get-go, but now I am, but it's almost sweet, almost candied.
For me, and only because I kind of mumbled it previously because I didn't want to lead the witness too much, but for me it's the baking spices on the nose. That's what really captures me. Yeah, baking spices. There's, again, some of that sweet malt or sweetened malt
going on. The rye seems to pop a little bit on this, or that rye proportion within the bourbon mash bill.
Yeah, something I always describe as brown spice. Maybe it doesn't mean much to a lot of people, but brown spice means rye to me. Oh, that rye grain, I think, is quite present. Very soft spice to that. I was watching you here. The listeners obviously can't see you on video the way I can, but when I nose this, I don't nose it for long because it really makes me want to take a sip of it.
Yeah.
And in watching you, I feel like you've kind of done that same transition as me, which is nosing it, like what I'm getting, maybe some caramel, maybe some sweetness, maybe some spice. I wonder if it tastes like that.
Yeah. No, you want to sip it immediately because it's incredibly inviting. I would argue that the palate doesn't taste exactly like the nose. There's connective tissue for sure, and I want to discuss that. But off the bat, the texture is awesome. The texture is remarkable. This is like an SCN pick with the texture.
And I would say at 45% alcohol, it's dangerously drinkable. I'm also pleased that they've gone down the path of cocktails the way that they have, because I think as I'm tasting this, I'm thinking about the complementary places I would put it in a cocktail and the lifting it would do in a cocktail.
This would go, there's like this bright orangey, zesty, citrusy note on the palate.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like I want to put this in a Blood and Sand or something like that, or maybe, kick up my Aperol Spritz a little bit and, with those orange notes. But yeah, it's interesting. I found on the nose, the high rye bourbon proportion is more prominent, and on the palate, it just does a flip. It goes from 80-20 to 20-80.
Yep. Of that American single malt, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That 100% malted barley really comes through.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, that's complete, though. It brings you in on the nose, delivers you through the palate, and then this nice, soft, citrusy, sweet finish to it. It is interesting, though, just to bring you back to that 80-20 and then 20-80 as it goes from nose to palate. It's not jarring.
No.
It's not like you go, the nose is doing one thing. Whoa, wait a second. What's the palate doing? It's more like someone just changed the control knobs or the volume knobs, right?
Yeah.
Like on the nose, your rye is playing louder than your malt. On the palate, your malt is playing louder than your rye. It's just turning those dials.
I tell you, Tim Gullicksrud is loving the connection to music.
Well, I'm hoping James Saxon is too.
Oh, that's right.
Maybe Daniel Whittington also.
Oh, yep, of course, Daniel Whittington. I have to say it the way you say it, Whittington. Whittington.
So that actually brings me, I'll make this a very quick aside. Have you been watching My Lady Jane on Amazon Prime?
No, I'm not familiar with the show.
We've been watching as a family. We're blitzing as a family. There's only 8 episodes. They're maybe 45, 50 minutes long.
It's the fantasy one where it reimagines one of the wives of Henry VIII. Is that one?
In a sense. It's Lady Jane Grey who came to the throne, and so it's historical fiction.
Yes, exactly.
But the reason that I bring it up is the narrator of the show is phenomenal. And any time there's a W, it always is a WH.
Or an HW.
Yeah. No, have you always wished you could be somewhere else? Have you always wanted something of your own?
Is this your way of telling people you've narrated the show?
Gosh, I wish. And so, yes, your comment a second ago had me go down that path. Great show. Loving
Yep.
it as a family.
Yep.
Highly recommend it. I will say this. It's rated TV 14. Every single episode, we have all looked at each other and gone, that's not TV 14.
Yeah, it's. I think they give it a little elbow. I think it kicks it up a little bit.
It is very, very risky. At least one scene an episode is not TV 14. The language isn't even TV 14. But so I send that out with a caveat. Amazing show. If you're going to put your 14-year-old in front of it, know that you might have to explain some words.
I tell you, the more I sit with this whiskey, I love what it's doing. I love the combination. I don't know if I've ever tasted anything that combines a more traditional American spirit like bourbon with a newer American spirit like single malt. That seems somewhat of a new combination to me, at least in my experience. And I love what it's doing. I don't know what the proportions are. I don't know how they put it together, but I think it was done really well and done with love, done with care. Do they talk about the proportions? I don't think they talk about the distilleries.
I don't recall us talking proportions. It's one element I was leaving the door open if they wanted to.
Yep.
And if they didn't lead it, I was not going to ask them that directly.
Okay.
Because I feel like if you want to share, you do. And if you don't, you don't. So.
Yeah, this is great for anybody living in LA or there around. They're they do worse than to get a bottle of this. I really like it. And again, I like what you said before. This bottle was gifted to us. We don't have to say nice things. The fact of the matter is, it's a nice whiskey, so we're going to say nice things, right?
It definitely is. I'm just looking up their website, lodestarwhiskey.com, whiskey with an E, and it's a $45 bottle.
Shut the front door. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just trying to see if there's a place I can put in a zip code and see.
See, now, when you mention $45, and I'm trying to be less precious these days, but when you mention $45, I'm like, okay, I can very comfortably put this in a cocktail, just like our own Wilderness Trail Rye that's only $60 a bottle. Like, I'm happily going to, make paper planes out of it, or rye old fashions, or, do a rye daiquiri or something. Like, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just put in my zip code into their website, and $10 shipping and about $3.50 tax will bring this to my doorstep. So the entire enterprise I can get to my doorstep for under $60.
Man, Shevitz. Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah, it is. So it makes me think of when you and I did our 5 and 5 American spirits. Did we have a $50 price tag on that exercise? Was it the best, in our opinion, the best 5 under 50 in America?
Oh boy, you're asking me to use my memories.
Yeah. But that point aside, you don't have to clarify that. But that point aside, this already has me thinking about that list.
Oh yeah, it's a perfect whiskey for a whiskey under $50. Great drinker on that list. They do it. Yep.
Is it Old Forester who do the Prohibition?
Yes. Remarkable.
Right.
Great stuff.
Right. And then the rye from them that you were highly regarding.
Yep. So always have a bottle on my shelf. Always cocktailing with it.
Yep. Yeah, I think this at 45 comes right in there. Yeah, it's a great achievement. Really see what I'm saying, right? I came out of the interview really championing them. Then you taste, right? It's fantastic whiskey. So
it's basically a $1 per percentage of alcohol.
Exactly. 50 cents per proof point.
Go easy, Jason. Don't you make me do math. So I'm going to keep a little in my glass as we maybe discuss some news.
Extra, extra! Read all about
you and I, Jason, we don't have a ton of news to share, but I've got our global markets in mind, and specifically the UK. Mm-hmm. Just recently, we gained a new retail partner within the UK, and that is with the Whisky Shop. And
Indeed.
I think they've got 22 or so stores dotted around the UK. Yep. I'm not suggesting those of you that are living in the UK can find our bottlings in each of those stores. However, if you go to their website, you'll see a good number of our bottlings there, around 9 or 10 different offerings. So please check them out. And, we still remain, at the Good Spirits Company, at the Whiskey World, at the Whiskey Exchange. They have us as well. And, if you're bopping around bars and living in the UK, then you'd be right. You'd be right to hop into the Bon Accord in Glasgow, because they've been supporting us since the very beginning. They almost always have a single cask nation bottling or 4 on their shelves to taste out to people. And because I'm an American, I got to throw a little America in here. Our friend Mike at Travel Bar in Brooklyn on 31st of July celebrated 10 years of owning that lease. And he always has single cask nation bottlings on his shelf. So congrats to him. And if anybody's headed to New York, Brooklyn specifically, then you'd be right to visit Travel Bar too.
Very nice. Yeah, always glad to hear that. We're out and about in the world, Joshua.
Boot in a boot. Did I miss anything? Is there any other bits of news that you wanted to bring up to our dear listeners?
I think, as is pretty common, regular listeners know this, the summer tends to be a time of planning and preparation. And so we have had numerous casks bottled last month, the month of July, and we are continuing to bottle casks this month. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot coming. E-commerce will kick back in after a very short summer hiatus on launches. We do still have product sitting on the e-commerce site, singlecasknation.com. Please do go in. Please do acquire a little something. Keep those summer cocktails going. We've still got some Ardmore if anybody's got a special birthday coming up or a special celebration coming up. So many things. We're just reaching the last of the Ardnamurchan, the last of the Black Button, the last of the Catoctin Creek, the last of this incomplete Joshua Hatton list.
Balcones, they'll throw it on there, right? It's it's like 8 bottles here, 12 bottles there. It's
just ticking along. And listen, we've made no secret of it. This has been true the whole year. We've been talking the whole of 2024. I love the fact that somebody who hears about singlecasknation.com for the first time can go there and there are bottles. Yeah. We had several years of releases, sellouts, nothing on the website, and so many people who heard about us for the first time thought we were out of business when there was nothing on the website to purchase. So I'm glad we have a working, operating website where you can see bottles. So please, hop on in, purchase something. $300 get you free shipping. If you don't want to go as high as $300, you'll pay a $15 flat rate shipping fee up to that point. So go crazy. Treat yourself. Remember, you are worth it. You are always worth it.
You're good enough. You're smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like you.
Exactly correct. Now go buy Single Cask Nation whiskey.
Yeah, feed our children. That's something I always throw out, and no one makes a purchasing decision based on my children needing to be fed. I think I need to throw a new line out there, Jason.
Maybe your cats need fed. Oh, people love cats.
People do love cats. Yep.
Yeah, buy a bottle or Joshua will not feed his cats. No, that came out wrong. We need to. We're workshopping here live on the podcast.
Yeah, they know what happened with the squirrels. They're going to make assumptions on what's happening with the cats.
Buy a bottle or another squirrel gets it.
Do the international finger across the throat.
Legal have just texted to say, we must make it clear, these are jokes. We would never hurt or harm any living entity. Please, your purchase of a bottle will not in no way affect any human or non-human animal health.
Hey, we better stop this because there's an entire PETA protest happening outside my house right now. I don't know if you could hear them. They're getting loud though.
There's one thing I want to draw attention to before we get out of here today.
Okay. All right.
And it's an email that came into my inbox July 30. It came from Steve Hawley, the president of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. Mm-hmm. And you and I in the last episode were talking about the ratification of American Single Malt. The question came in from Dan Gryson about the tasting of American Single Malt Whiskey and as the big players. Is it good to have them in? Is it not? Where does it go? What's happening? Mm-hmm. Today we had Lodestar, the blend of high rye bourbon and American Single Malt Whiskey. And so I wanted to make mention of Steve's opening paragraph. He says, today, July 30, 2024.
24, okay.
Today marks 2 years since TTB issued the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for American Single Malt Whiskey. 2 years, and he puts exclamation point and puts it in bold. That it's taken them so long to take the last step and publish the final rule is not only dumbfounding and frustrating, but also increasingly damaging to the category. Mm-hmm. In bold, it's time for TTB to finish the job. And so we're working with Discus. We, as industry participants, have a letter to sign. There's a way to have voices heard. Mm-hmm. And I know last week we sent out a Single Cask Nation email that told the nation how to get involved.
Correct.
Do you want to add on to that, Joshua?
There was a nice, simple link provided to folk in the email, and I'll provide this as well, both in the Facebook posts for this episode and in the Instagram posts for this episode. But you follow the link, and it's to spiritsunited.org. And it's as simple as filling out first name, last name, address, email, phone number, and the letter is already written for you. You don't need to write anything. You just put your information down, read the letter, make sure you agree with it, and I think once you read it, you'll see it's a very agreeable letter. It's just saying, hey, make American Single Malt a category, just like bourbon is a category, just like rye is a category, and Scotch whiskey, etc. And so just fill that out. I mean, I could give a bit.ly link here, but I'm not going to do that.
Give it anyway.
I'm going to give the bit.ly link, and if you got a pen and piece of paper, write it down. If you're driving, please pull over or
put down your
do
drink before you write down this URL. I didn't say what the drink was. It could have been soda.
It's a Celsius. It's a Red Bull. They give you wings. And so here's the link. Again, this is to go to the Spirits United page where you could just fill out a quick form. It's just a couple of seconds to say, I agree with this request to the TTB that they should ratify American Single Malt as a legal whiskey category. That bit.ly link is bit.ly/3 lowercase y, lowercase I, uppercase U, lowercases O and V like Victor, and a 3.
There you go. It's easy as that, man.
Yep. Right.
Yeah, have your voice heard. If you're a whiskey person, a whiskey lover, somebody excited to see this burgeoning American Single Malt Whiskey category really take on wings, a la Joshua's endorsement of Red Bull a second ago, please please make your voice heard. It would be really wonderful to get some action on this. I also think I'd have to check the wax, but I think in the last episode I said it had been a year of silence. And here we are on almost 2 years of silence. 2 years since the commenting period was open. That's
absolutely
remarkable.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember that 2 years ago they said, well, the decision should be made in September. Well, now it's December. It's just kicking the can down the road, kick. Eventually, the game of kick the can has to end, and we need American single malt whiskey to be a category.
Yep. I wonder if that question of adjuncts is causing trouble. Because American single malt whiskey, as I would define it, is a pretty quick rubber stamp on the ratification. But
it's straightforward.
Very straightforward. I would also like to see caramel colour get out of the Scotch definition, but
no adjuncts.
You don't always get what you want. Use your label. Tell your consumer what you are and are not doing.
Listen, if we could have caramel coloring in whiskey, we should be able to bring back Paxaret sherry casks. There's like 3 German guys listening to this who are saying, yeah.
Health considerations aside?
What's a little cancer between friends?
There we are. There we are. You get it from drinking water from a hose pipe.
There you go. So there you go. Don't drink water from hose. All right, Jason. With all of this said, I raise my glass to you, to everyone, to our guests. Cheers, big ears.
Clang, clang, clang goes the trolley. I literally lost count between 2 and 3. I couldn't remember which number I just said.
I saw it on your face.
I literally couldn't remember what it said. And I was just briefly listening to you. I was like, okay, it was 2, 3.
It's that Hogwarts mindset. You're like, is it 1 3/4?
Yeah, that's how we should get. 0 elephants, quarter elephant, half elephant, 3/4 elephant, full elephant. Yeah, that would get you there.
That will get you there. All right.